Hey there. Today I want to tell you what's going on with the Mark Carney Liberal government's new anti-free speech law, Bill C9, and update you on some possible amendments to the bill that would violate not just free speech protections, but religious freedom as well. It's an issue that we at the Canadian Constitution Foundation have been banging the drum on, and a lot has been happening that I want to update you on. But before I get to that, I need to tell you something else a little bit more personal. I don't talk about my personal life on this channel that much, but today I'm going to. And the news is that I am getting a new job. I'm really excited to share that I will be stepping into the role of acting executive director of the Canadian Constitution Foundation beginning in February of next year. Our executive director, Joanna Barron, is expecting twins that are due in February, so she will be stepping away temporarily on maternity leave early in the new year. Now, Joanna's leadership at the CCF has elevated our organization in so many ways, and as she steps back a bit to welcome this new chapter of her life, this very exciting chapter, I am so honored that I'm going to be leading Freedom's Defense Team into 2026. And I plan to hit the ground running on a lot of different things. And one of the things I'm working on right now is interviewing lawyers because we're hiring someone new to join our team. We are looking to hire a new internal lawyer to help argue cases so we don't need to hire outside counsel and so that we can take on and litigate more cases. So if you support the work we do at the Canadian Constitution Foundation, you can help ensure we begin this next chapter with the strongest possible foundation. And right now is actually the perfect time to help because until December 31st, all new donations are going to be matched up to $125,000. So that means your contribution could be doubled and help us get a $250,000 head start. And one of the big areas that I am looking to work on in 2026 is free speech, including Bill C9, which is the topic of today's video. So let's get into it. I did another video where I talked about Bill C9. That's the Liberals' Combating Hate Act. Now, C9 expands the criminal law into the realm of expression in ways that I think are unjustified violations of the Charter-protected right to free expression. The bill would lower existing constitutional thresholds. It would remove safeguards against politicized or abusive prosecutions. The bill introduces vague new offenses and risks chilling lawful debate and protests in Canada. And as I'm going to discuss in this video, could also jeopardize religious freedom in this country. It could jeopardize religious freedom through a new amendment that is being debated right now as I release this video. So let me give you the background. I appeared at the House of Commons Justice Committee as a witness a few weeks ago where I outlined my opposition to Bill C9. Now, I said that our constitutional tradition is clear. Free expression protects even offensive and disturbing speech, including hateful views, unless they cross a very, very high threshold. Now, courts have always treated this as a question of where limits on protected speech exist, not on whether speech is protected at all. And the high threshold exists so that Canadians can freely discuss controversial ideas, especially on sensitive political and moral topics, without fearing criminal sanction. And the problem with C9 is that it lowers that constitutional threshold and expands criminal liability in ways that threaten legitimate expression, dissent, protest, and yes, now potentially even religious views. Now, my primary recommendation is that Parliament withdraw C9, but in the event that they are not going to withdraw the bill, I suggested some really specific amendments. Very briefly, the recommendations I made are to make the statutory definition of hate actually comply with the case law. The Liberal government has suggested lowering that threshold and departing from the case law definition of hate. I've also recommended retaining Attorney General consent for hate speech laws. Currently, this is a requirement and it acts as a guardrail against abuse, and the Liberals want it removed. I also argued that we need to remove the proposal for a standalone offense motivated by hatred, which could apply to non-criminal regulatory offenses and creates a risk of duplicative punishment as well as prosecutorial overcharging to create plea pressure. I've proposed removing the plan to ban, quote, symbols of hate and to eliminate the proposal to create a redundant offense of, quote, intimidation near religious and cultural spaces. Because this is already an offense, it's just not properly enforced, and creating new laws because existing laws aren't enforced is not a solution to any problem. So those are my proposals, but I actually want to talk about this new amendment, this risk that the government will be criminalizing religious belief. So right now, the criminal code prohibits the willful promotion of hatred in section 319 sub 2. And when this law was originally enacted, Parliament wanted to make sure that it didn't unduly limit religious speech. And so it created a defense in section 319 sub 3. So you can't be convicted of the willful promotion of hatred if you express a good faith religious belief or a belief based on a religious text. Now, I watched every single Justice Committee meeting on Bill C9, and in every single meeting, the Bloc Québécois member fixated on this religious defense. The member asked every single witness if the defense should be maintained, and the Bloc's position is that it should be removed. It should not be. And I made this very clear in my committee appearance. But there are some big developments on this issue. Everything is in flux. So what exactly is happening right now? Well, in order to pass the bill, the Liberals, who have a minority government, need the support of the Bloc. And the Bloc are saying they will not vote for C9 unless the religious defense is removed. And last week, the National Post reported that the Liberals made a deal with the Bloc to remove the defense. Now, I've written a lot about why this would be a mistake. I had a column in the National Post about it. Basically, the defense is a safeguard that protects millions of Canadians from state intrusion into matters of faith. And the religious defense has been essential to the constitutionality of the hate speech prohibition to begin with. In the case of R.N. Keekstra, the Supreme Court wrote that the offense of willfully promoting hatred is a justified limit because it minimally impairs the right to free expression, due in part to the, quote, presence of the 319 sub 3 defenses. So the courts, in other words, upheld the hate speech prohibition because the religious exemption exists. If the government removes it, the constitutional floor collapses. But even beyond this constitutional liability, this risk of making the whole regime unconstitutional, removing the defense is a profound moral and civil liberties mistake. We should not want, let alone empower, prosecutors to criminalize the form of a prayer. We do not want criminalization of religious texts, which across all faith traditions contain pleas for justice against enemies, metaphors for divine retribution, expressions of anguish, symbolism, and cosmic struggle. This is not the realm of the police. If the state begins parsing psalms and hadiths line by line in a courtroom, then we have forgotten why the charter exists at all. And in practice, the religious defense is already exceedingly narrow. It has rarely been invoked, and in my research of the case law, I could not find a single example where it has actually been used successfully. The courts have actually rejected attempts to cloak hateful speech in religious language. The Court of Appeal of Ontario, in the case of R.N. Harding, affirmed a lower court ruling that the religious defense does not shield speech that willfully promotes hatred merely because it is embedded with religious language, because then, to quote the court, religious opinion could be used with impunity as a Trojan horse to carry the intended message of hate forbidden by Section 319. The point I think we all need to take from the case law and the defense is that it's narrow, and it exists perhaps because, as we all know, it is possible to misapply scripture, to misconstrue it. As Shakespeare said in The Merchant of Venice, the devil can quote scripture for his purpose. And the court in Harding said that it can't be used that way to promote hate, that you can't shield hate just because it's in a religious message. So the defense exists, but it's narrow. And look, I mean, from a point of first principles, the whole thing is ridiculous. The response to the misuse of scripture isn't for the government to come in and correct people about what scripture means. It's actually only biblically minded or religious people who can respond to the abuse of the Bible or other scripture in other faith traditions. The government can't solve that tradition because the government doesn't understand religion. We want them to stay away from it. A good example of this actually came at Justice Committee, where Liberal Committee Chair Mark Miller claimed to a witness, the executive director of Christian Legal Fellowship, that portions of the Bible are hateful. Here is the clip. It is shocking.
I just want to dig in a bit about the concept of good faith, Mr. Ross. In Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Romans, there's other passages, there is clear hatred towards, for example, homosexuals. I don't understand how the concept of good faith could be invoked if someone were literally invoking a passage from, in this case, the Bible, but there are other religious texts that say the same thing, and somehow say that this is good faith. I mean, clearly there are situations in these texts where these statements are hateful. They should not be used to invoke or be a defense, and there should perhaps be discretion for prosecutors to press charges. I just want to understand what your notion of good faith is in this context, where there are clearly passages in religious texts that are clearly hateful.
So I don't know that I would agree with that characterization, Mr. Chair, that passages are categorically hateful, especially not passages in the Bible. And I think if members of Parliament are of the view that passages of the Bible are hateful, that's something that Canadians should be aware of.
I mean, I could not believe that Miller said this, but then he doubled down on it on X. And on X, he said, I say this in particular because I am a Christian, which in itself to me is just mind-boggling. I don't want to get too much into, explaining different faith traditions, but the idea of Miller saying the Bible is hateful completely misunderstands the teachings of Christ. So Miller is confused. And if Miller thinks that he can use statute to somehow sanitize scripture in a scripture he doesn't even properly understand, then it's worse than confusion. It's dangerous because religious expression is messy. It's symbolic. It is deeply human. It concerns the nature of justice, suffering, good and evil, and the most intimate dimensions of identity and conscience. These are precisely the areas where the criminal law should not tread. We do not want the government getting into religious debate, especially given that most members of the government are absolutely ignorant of religion, including, like in Miller's case, sometimes their own religion. So as I wrote in the National Post, the criminal law is the state's most violent instrument. It should not be swung at the human soul. And the Bible is the most banned book in the history of the world because it's powerful and it points to an authority beyond the reach of government. And a government that fears religious speech isn't fighting extremism, it is fighting competition. So the Bloc's amendment to remove the religious defense would take Canada down a very dark path. And the first principles problem is that we should never have criminalized belief in the first place. But now that we're in that arena, to strip away the defense, and you're really in constitutionally questionable territory. This is leading down a path to criminalizing faith. So I think that the defense needs to be maintained. Will it be what is happening now? Well, now the CBC has reported that the bill is stalled. It stalled last week, apparently because the deal was brokered without the Prime Minister's office's approval. There were some government sources that spoke to CBC News and said that Justice Minister Sean Fraser actually brokered the whole deal with the Bloc Québécois without getting buy-in from the PMO. And then the Justice Committee last week suddenly canceled their meetings. And now a whole lot of religious groups have written public letters to the government saying that this religious defense needs to be maintained. There's a letter from a group of Muslims, from the Catholic bishops. I just got off a call with around 900 Protestant faith leaders who are concerned about this issue. And now today, December 9th, committee is going to be meeting. I think they have an 8-hour meeting scheduled. And I just learned before recording this video that now the Liberals are planning to support the removal of the religious exemption. The National Post reported this based on speaking with a senior anonymous government source. They said that they now have an agreement to remove the religious exemption with the Bloc. So this is bad. This is really urgent. You need to contact your member of parliament. and let them know this needs to be stopped. We've made it really easy for you to reach out to your MP. We made a portal online at the ccf.ca/withdraw bill C9. It lets you select your MP. It can help you find your MP, select them, send them a letter, and you can also pick up your phone and call your MP. I mean, please do this. We need this bill done. It is so dangerous. Removing the exemption, removing attorney general consent, we are heading somewhere really, really dark, really, really toxic as a society. So write to your MP. The website is the ccf.ca/withdraw bill C9. I'm going to end the video now because I really want you to go do this. Please contact your MP. We need this bill stopped. So that's it for the update. Thanks for watching, and let's keep fighting for freedom in Canada.